A surprising plea deal in the Bryan Kohberger, University of Idaho quadruple murder case. Let's discuss. I'm Dave Aronberg, former state attorney for Palm Beach County, aka the Florida LawMan, here on Legal AF, where we meet at the intersection of law, politics, and occasionally true crime. And if there was ever a time to talk about true crime, it is now, when the case that a lot of people were watching, were ready for the trial in August, has now been short-circuited. There's a plea deal in the case against murderer Bryan Kohberger. I can say that because he is now admitted to it as part of this plea deal. But my goodness, didn't expect this case to go away. The state of Idaho had this guy dead to rights. This was the murder of 4 University of Idaho students. And Bryan Kohberger, who all the evidence pointed to him as the killer, has a victory here in that in exchange for pleading guilty to the 4 murders, he's gonna have life in prison 4 times. No death penalty. Death penalty will be taken off the table. And as a former prosecutor, I got to tell you that I was surprised because they had this guy. They had the evidence, and I think it was a likelihood that he would have received the death penalty. After all, if you don't get the death penalty for slaughtering four innocents as a wannabe serial killer, then who gets a death penalty? I mean, this guy studied serial killers. He was a criminology doctoral student. He is someone who clearly planned this. And then when they asked about his alibi, that's the only comedic part of this. It was his alibi. Couldn't come up with one, except for months later, he finally said that, well, he was out driving around stargazing in the middle of the night in late November in a hardtop. Not a convertible, a hardtop. Like you can see lots of stars in Idaho in the frigid air at 2 a.m, but that's what he said he was doing. Must be the unluckiest guy in the world, obviously, where there was no witness. He had no real alibi, no one to say that he was with them or saw him. No, he was on his own. We know he wasn't home because the cell phone data, so he was stargazing. He was driving around at that time of the murders. So this guy was guilty of sin. And obviously the DNA on the sheath of the knife used in the murders, I mean, it's him. Also, when they found him at his parents' house in Pennsylvania, thousands of miles away, they saw him separating garbage, taking the garbage that he was using and putting it into a separate trash receptacle, and doing so wearing gloves. Normal behavior, right? That someone doesn't want his DNA on any materials because he's guilty. So we had all that stuff. We had the fact that his phone was on until he left the house, and then he turned it off. So during the time of the murders, his phone was off, thinking that, well, just turn it off, no one will know where I am. And of course, then it was turned on his way back home. I mean, there really is no reasonable doubt here. And the court in recent days did 2 things that led the defense to want this plea deal. Number 1, they refused to delay the trial. That was important. And number 2, they refused to allow a third-party culprit defense, meaning they refused to allow the defense to point the finger at the real killer, some bogus person who wasn't even there, but that's who they were going to point the finger at. They were trying to create something. You have to have some basic evidence to just throw things at the wall. They didn't have even that, so the judge said, no, we're not going to let you just invent someone who is the real killer. And as a result, the defense said, let's deal. But why did the prosecution deal? Here's the most troubling part of it. The Gonzalez family put out a social media post saying that they were blindsided by this and they were upset by this. And that should never happen. When you are a prosecutor, you do not want the victims' families out there blasting the deal and saying they're upset, because you're supposed to stand up for victims of crime, right? You don't want them to be victimized again. And so when you see that happening, it's a bad look, and it's really heart-wrenching when you see a family that has lost so much now feel betrayed by the ones who are supposed to stand up for them. So you would hope that the prosecutor's office talked to them in advance as well as the other victims' families. And maybe they did. And if they did and they got most of the families to sign off, that would go a long way. But it is not a good look if you go ahead with a plea deal without consulting the families. You do not want to surprise them with this. I mean, we're all gearing up for a trial, and that trial is now not going to happen. And for a family that perhaps wanted to see Kohberger squirm in the courtroom, well, they're not going to get that. They're not going to get that satisfaction, but they will get more information than otherwise. Perhaps now, because he's not going to trial, he will get up and explain what happened and why he did it. And so that's something that the families wouldn't get otherwise, because if he went to trial, he was not testifying. He was not going to testify, and I doubt he'd even get up and apologize afterwards, because he'd have his appeals. According to this plea deal, there will be no appeals. He'll get 4 life sentences, and he's going to waive his appeals. So it's over. But you would hope that now that it's over, that he could at least give the family some closure. Hopefully that's part of the deal, to at least speak about what happened, because otherwise they would never have received that. But here's the social media post from the Gonsalves family. Gonsalves family page. It's true. We are beyond furious at the state of Idaho. They have failed us. Please give us some time. This was very unexpected. We appreciate all your love and support. Hashtag heartbroken. Hashtag Kaylee Jade forever. Yeah, that should never happen. So hopefully there's an explanation for this from the prosecutors. Let us not forget the victims, the Idaho 4, because everyone has been talking about Bryan Kohberger, and I have been as well, admittedly. But let's never forget the victims here was not Kohberger. That guy's a murderer, quadruple murderer. Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chaplin. They were all stabbed to death in an off-campus residence in Moscow, Idaho. And the case was moved from the small town to Boise. And now the case looks like it will be over. Now, what was interesting is that I've done a bunch of videos on my previous channel, which was dedicated to true crime. And we merged with Legal AF on my previous channel, Court Authorities. Every time I do a video on Bryan Kohberger, I'd get lots of comments from Bryan Kohberger fans, all these delusional conspiracy theorists out there who believe that Kohberger was framed, he was innocent, somehow the DNA was planted, or the cell phone evidence was bogus, or the fact that he drove the same car as the killer didn't mean anything, or the fact he didn't have an alibi didn't mean anything. All this stuff because people, I guess, just believe what they want to believe. And it doesn't matter if the facts just stare them right in the face. And I always said to those individuals, I said, you can say what you want, even on our channel, but my one requirement is once he's found guilty, and he will be found guilty, you need to come back, because I suspect you'll be far gone. And indeed, his stands are far gone. You don't hear much of them right now. How do you explain that he's going to plead guilty to 4 consecutive life sentences? An innocent person doesn't do that. No. Can't blame this one on a technicality. So I wonder where those folks will go, but I suspect that they'll find some other conspiracy theory. Because that's the beauty of being a conspiracy theorist, is that once your conspiracy theory is debunked, you just easily find another conspiracy theory. It's just easy to explain everything as one series of conspiracies. Must be nice to live your life with such illusions. But we don't do that here on Legal AF. We deal with facts. We deal with evidence. And we focus on the law, and sometimes we go beyond law and politics into the world of true crime, such as this video. I'm Dave Aronberg, aka the Florida LawMan. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, share with a friend, leave a comment below. Let's remember the Idaho 4. I'll see you next time.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.